back to Life Literature. Today I'm going to deal with the devices and the themes of The Clown's Wife by Johnson Agard. So this is the second episode. In my earlier clip, I have discussed the poem with you. I hope that you enjoyed and understood the poem quite well. If you have problems, please forward, comment down below. I'll try my best to give you answers. So we'll go back to the devices first. Device number 1, rhetorical question. Rhetorical question I have explained earlier in my clip, and I'm going to do it again for your benefit. Rhetorical question is a question that you ask not for the purpose of expecting an answer, but just to highlight, just to emphasize a certain fact. So what is the rhetorical question we have in this poem? We find it in the very first stanza. About my husband the clown, what could I say? Asked by the wife of the clown. So this is the rhetorical question we find, and not only that, in the last stanza also we get another rhetorical question. This time it is asked by the clown himself. What does the clown ask? Clown says, "Oh life, our life, what would I do without this clown of a wife?" So first the wife's question, and finally the husband's question. What do they tell us? They tell us the wife has a doubt about the clown's dual personality, two different types of behavior on stage and at home. And in the final stanza, we get the clown's explanation. The clown says this wife is essential for his life. There's no other there's no other solace for him but his wife. So these are the two rhetorical questions we find in the poem. So that is number 1, device number 1. Now we'll move to device number 2, that is metaphor. What is a metaphor? Metaphor is an indirect comparison. So in a metaphor, you compare one thing with another, but not directly. It is done in an indirect manner, but it is so very strong. The comparison is very strong. You feel one thing is exactly as the same as the other thing. So here the metaphor we get actually is found in this phrase, he is a king on a throne. I suppose you can remember that phrase. He is a king on a throne. So why does the poet compare the clown to a king on a throne? Just for the purpose of glorification. The poet wants to glorify the clown. Not only that, not only it is the intention of the poet, it is the intention of the clown's wife as well. Clown's wife sees her own husband as a clown on stage. He is actually a king. A royal image is molded here in this metaphor. And there's another simpler metaphor in the poem as well. The second metaphor we find in the phrase world on his shoulder. Can you remember? That's how the clown comes home, leaving all those dresses and the attire of the clown behind. He comes home as a real father, as a real husband. At that moment, he comes keeping the world on his shoulders. What does this world represent? World is the heavy responsibilities he's shouldering as an ordinary person who lives an ordinary life. So these are the two metaphors we have in the poem. Third device, paradox. What is a paradox? Are you familiar with this device? Paradox is actually a contradiction. Contradiction means difference, a complete different thing, and another complete different thing is they are set together so that the difference is highlighted quite well. So this contradiction, it can be sometimes puzzling as well. So such contradictions are available in this poem at several places. So these are important, these contradictions are important for the themes of the poem as well. The very first contradiction we see in the poem is found in the third line of the second stanza. I have mentioned that earlier also. That is king on a throne. So that is found in third line of the second stanza. And in the first line of the fourth stanza you get another word, poor soul. Now let's try to compare these two phrases. What are the two phrases? King on a throne, and the second phrase is poor soul. How can you put these two phrases together? So these two phrases mention the same person. Who is the same person? The clown. In discussion, the clown is introduced at one place as a king on a throne, and in the other place as a poor soul. Can you see the difference? It is quite different. Contradicts. The first phrase contradicts with the second phrase. So such a thing is called a paradox. So this paradox is there. Why? To highlight the dual personality we find in the clown. The two different roles we find in the clown. So that is the first paradox we find in the poem. The second paradox we find in the poem is, we can call, the paradoxicity of life. The poem tells us about the life paradoxicity, how different life can be from time to time, from place to place, from person to person. So this paradoxicity of life is very well found in the final stanza, where the clown says in the final couplet, the first line, the clown says, "O life, our life." O and R, I explained them as exclamations. Can you remember? So these exclamations, the two exclamations, O and R, tells you two different things about life. O give you a sense of surprise. This surprise we forward when we are sad, when we are sorrowful. R is also another exclamation where we use it to express our amazement and sometimes appreciation of something. When we find life amazing, surprising, kind of a happy life, if we feel life is happy, we use this expression R. So O and R together, that shows the ups and downs of life. Up and downs of life. The good times and the bad times of life. So this is the paradoxicity of life. We go through life, when we live through our lives, sometimes we find sorrowful moments, sometimes we find happy moments, sometimes we find them both at hand together. That's life. Life is all about this. So that is the paradoxicity of life. We'll move on to the third paradox. The third paradox says the paradoxicity of men, the paradoxicity of people. People also are in the same manner paradoxical, different. So here we are talking about one particular person. Who is this particular person? The clown. And the clown at one time is a happy person, yet at another time he is a very sad person. The appearance and the reality. Appearance versus reality. The difference between the same man in his two different behaviors. Men, people are also paradoxical. Not only life, people are also paradoxical. Even myself, I also behave in these types of different manners from time to time. That is the reality of life. Think about yourself. You should also feel the same. You will also realize that your behaviors are also quite different from time to time. Right. We'll move on to the next device. Device number 4, visual imagery. I suppose by now you are quite familiar with this device. Visual images are the mental pictures you form in your mind when you read something. So these mental pictures can be very rich sometimes depending on the talent of the writer and how much you can also grab what the writer has written. So the visual pictures Johnson Agard creates here in the poem are quite rich. He gives us rich images. He suggests us rich images. What are the rich images he suggests? Just think, take 1 minute and think. What are the images? Can you remember? He first formed some images of a clown who acts on the stage. I juggle with eggs, I turn cartwheels, I tell jokes, I do me latest card tricks, I even have a borrow of his red nose. Actually, these are the actions of the clown's wife, but through these words we visualize how a clown behaves on stage. The very jovial acts of a clown are created in front of our eyes, in the mind's eye of the reader. That is our third eye. I suppose you know in literature we have, when we are dealing with reading, we have 3 eyes. Not only the 2 physical eyes we have here, the third eye is very effective. I think that it is quite more effective than our physical eyes. The third eye is the mind eye. So these images are formed in our mind's eye, in our third eye. That is the visual image created here in the poem. And not only that, didn't you visualize how the clown comes home without all those funny, beautiful and happy attire? He comes home as a brooding figure, keeping a heavy load on his back. So didn't you have that image in your mind when you read the poem? I suppose you had. So those are the visual images. And thirdly, to suggest the visual images, the poet uses another technique. I mentioned it in the earlier clip also, that is the demonstrative pronoun. The use of the demonstrative pronouns. He not only uses, Johnson Agard not only uses the demonstrative pronoun at one place, at 3 points, at 3 places he uses this demonstrative pronoun. At one place he says that door, and another place he says up there. He's a king on a throne, up there. And in another place he says, at another place he says sits there. And not only 3 places, 4 places, finally he says this clown of a wife. So these are the demonstrative pronouns Johnson Agard is using. What is the use of these demonstrative pronouns? He directly points out the places, points at the people and make the visual a reality in front of our eyes. We are also a part of the clown's wife's home front. As we have stayed there with the clown and his wife, we also see how the clown enters home. We also see how the clown is seated on that chair, murmuring to himself. We also see the clown's wife, this clown of a wife we see. So we are, the reader is made a part of the home of the clown. So these are the 3 instances where we find the visual images. Now we'll move on to the 5th device we find in the poem, that is colloquial language. What do you mean by colloquial language? Colloquial language is the language you use in our ordinary life, daily life, the very simple and everyday language. So that is called colloquial language. Did you notice these phrases I'm going to mention now? I do me best. I do me latest card trick. Who says this? It is the clown's wife. Clown's wife uses these expressions. Didn't you find it a little bit funny? A little bit queer? I do mean best. How do you say that? Is it the correct way of saying? Is it grammatically correct? I do mean latest card trick. Is it correct? It sounds funny, no? How can we alter it? Yes, I do my best. I do my latest card trick. That's the correct usage. That is the expected usage of English language. But here, Agad is using this funny, quite absurd type of language. Why? Because this is the usual language of ignorant, lower social class of in England. So that is how the normal man speaks. They are not so worried, they are not so bothered about these grammatically correct sentences. They just utter how they find it, how they have seen the language, how they have experienced the language. Now the next device is device number 6, alteration. Alteration is the repetition of consonant sounds, close repetition of consonant sounds. So here I am going to give you one example only. You have to run through the poem and find out other examples. That's a challenge for you. Alteration, I am going to give one. Here, him. The sound repeated here is her. The sound repeated here is her. Here, him. That is found in the second stanza. Device number 7, assonance. What's assonance? I suppose you know that is the repetition, close repetition of the vowel sounds. This time also I am going to give you only one example that is found once again in the second stanza. Thrown, mourn. What is the repeated vowel sound here? Thrown and mourn. That is the long O sound. Long sound O is repeated here. That is assonance. Device number 8. Last device. Device number 8 is irony. What's irony? Irony is a kind of sarcasm you create by using words. So it is actually a hint. You are very familiar of hints, are you? Yes, hint is something you use verbally to hurt another person. It is a verbal way of hurting another person. So that is irony. So we find different types of irony here in the poem. So one ironical thing that we find here in the poem, very expressive of Johnson Agard, that is the clown. We know the role of the clown. A clown is supposed to make the audience happy, make the other people happy. He is the creator of happiness. He is the spring of happiness. But what has happened to his personal life? Is he happy himself? No, he is not. We have understood it by reading the whole poem. The spring of happiness himself is not happy. Isn't this ironical? It is quite ironical. It is a kind of a hint. So we can't even believe it. That's why we were astonished by reading the poem last time. So that is the irony here. The entertainer had become a sufferer in real life. Second place where we find irony, that is also very interesting. The clown's wife, the title says. Isn't that so? The title says the clown's wife. That means the wife of the clown. And in the final stanza, the word order is changed to some extent and the poet says clown of a wife. What is the difference between these two? Clown's wife and clown of a wife. What is the difference? Clown's wife gives you the idea of belonging, possession. So this wife belongs to the clown. She is the wife of the clown. Look at the second phrase, clown of a wife. What does that mean? This wife is quite funny. This wife herself is almost like a clown, a funny wife. The clown's wife is a funny wife. Why do you think that Johnson Agard wants to call this wife a funny wife. We are not quite sure about the reasons, his particular reasons he had not told us, but we can guess. Maybe he is thinking of the funny actions that she is capable of to make the clown laugh. Maybe he is thinking that the clown's wife is ignorant. That's why she uses that dialect, that type of language. I do me best, I do me latest card trick. So maybe that type of dialect she is using because she is ignorant. Ignorant means not well educated. So maybe because of that also she is funny. And there can be another reason. She does not take life as a burden. Although life had become a burden for them, she is not ready to accept it as a burden. She has taken life very simply, and she has turned out to be a very carefree wife who's trying to make her hard-working husband happy. So maybe because of this, the poet here calls the wife as a clown of a wife. And expresses it as the idea of the clown. So this is also ironical. Clown's wife is a funny wife, not a very serious type of a wife. So normally wives are very serious, haven't you noticed? But this wife is not that serious, right? So that is the second irony the poet is forwarding us. The third irony, that is very important. The third irony is found in the final rhyming couplet. Did you notice this? We find a perfect rhyme only here in the poem. Throughout the entire poem, we find a perfect rhyme here. What is the rhyme you have here? Life and wife. It is a perfect match. So the clown says, "Oh life, our life, what would I do without this clown of a wife?" Life and wife, life and wife, a perfect match. A couplet he has emphatically used here, a couplet, 2 lines, double lines to show the husband and wife, and the clown considers his life is his wife. So this shows the perfect match between these two people. Can you remember I asked you a question in my last video clip in episode 1? Why doesn't the clown share his problems with the wife? Here you get the answer. Actually, there are 2 answers. One thing is the clown's wife is not in a position to understand this blues of his life because she is ignorant. And another reason is she is not in a position to help him in any other manner because she is uneducated and she herself can't do a job to support the clown economically. And so he must have thought, why should I worry her also with my troubles? Because he loves him, because he loves her so much, he does not want to bother his wife with these burdens. So this is the answer why he does not like to share his burdens with the wife. Right, so those are the devices we find here in the poem. And now our next task is to forward towards the themes of the poem. What are the themes here actually? Theme number 1 I have already forwarded to you in the earlier clip. Theme number 1 is the appearance versus reality. Appearance is not always the reality. You can't judge people by looking at their external behavior, external appearance. It is impossible to decide a person because almost all people, every person has a dual personality. A dual personality because it depends on the roles we perform. So here I do my role as a teacher. Here I am a different person, but as a mother I might be a different person. You have to come to my home and you have to just observe if you want to know how I act as a mother. So there I have two roles here, as a teacher and as a mother. So we all have such different roles. So appearance cannot be the reality. Sometimes it can be, but it is not the 100% reality. So that is what is being suggested here as a basic theme in the poem. The second theme, the poet wants to show us the struggle of life, the struggle to live, how hard it is to go on living for each and every person. So money becomes a strong factor in this struggle of life, and here the poet has selected a specimen from the society, a poorly earned family. A family who is poverty stricken. So that is the specimen that the poet has used here. So we all know if we have money or if we do not have money, we know that life is not a bed of roses. We have our own bundles and shares of problems and difficulties. So we have to tread through life with all these burdens keeping on our shoulders, but at the same time we can be happy because there are different things in our lives that can make us happy. We should not mourn always. We should not complain always. We have our difficulties along with us, but we have to tread on life happily, thinking that difficulties and problems are common to all. So that is the second theme the poet is emphasizing, the struggle of life, the struggle to live. We have to, a man has to perform many roles for survival as well. Not only one role, we have to perform many roles. So it is a difficult task. It is a struggle. So that is the second theme. Third theme is connected to this second theme as well. Third theme is, I think, is the most important here. This is a plus theme, a positive theme. The positive theme is the poet suggests at the end, at the very end, at the final couplet, the poet suggests that love conquers all. Love is more powerful than any other thing of life. Love can make us happy. That is shown in the final line. The clown says, what would I do without this clown of a wife? So all his life problems are forgotten in front of the wife. The wife has turned out to be the solace of his life. So the wife is the symbol of happiness here. He has so many problems in his life, but when he is united with his wife at home, he can be happy. He is soothed, he is comforted. So that is the final theme of the poem. So I suppose that you have understood. We'll meet in another video clip with another poem. So till then, goodbye.